that sense, that whole feeling of inadequacy, that whole feeling of something is missing, that whole feeling of unhappiness that's pervading everywhere in the world today began with the dichotomy, the division, when we started breaking ourselves out of the cosmic system, beginning with how the culture in the West started defining it and wanted to control everything, because that is the one way, one form of knowledge. That is where everything begins. Now, I'm not gonna. I just wanted to, but yeah, they also talk about critical thinking on page 54. I really want you to look at that a little bit. How they still, say nothing, everything that is critical thinking is what constitutes knowledge. Everything else, but there's just very few people who can do it. Therefore, those few people should lead everybody else. Hence, the white people who created that critical thinking can now go to other culture and dominate and exploit them. Yeah. So on the European self-image, page 55, you can read that second paragraph there. It's also very relevant. And then she talks about the symbolism, which is made a way of expression, a technique, and symbolic, a way of thinking. So you can see in terms of the European language and the African original languages, you can see it has to do with symbolic and symbolism, because there is just so much in the symbolic expression of reality that cannot be captured by European writing languages. So that's another point that she's making. But what I really want to read here is the conversation between how she takes on an African writer who critiques African ways, and she shows how he's missing the point. That is what I will close today with, because I felt like it was very, very essential. So this African guy says that is John S on page 59 at the bottom. Mbiti is very, very much South African name, but I don't know. So he's writing from a Eurocentric perspective. He has this to say about African religious thought. You're there at the bottom, very bottom. Mbiti says, so long as the concept of time is two-dimensional with a sasa, present, and a zamani, past, African peoples cannot entertain a glorious hope to which mankind may be destined. Here, African religions and philosophy must admit a defeat. And that's an African who talk, right? They have supplied no solution. Do religions become universal only when they have been weaned from the cradle of looking towards the zamani, the past, and make a breakthrough towards the future with all the mythological promises or redemption? It is in this area that world religions may hope to conquer African traditional religions and philosophy by adding this new element to the two-dimensional life and thinking of African people. Only three-dimensional religion can hope to last in modern Africa, which is increasingly discovering and adjusting to a third-dimensional time. Look at how she's taking on this guy. I love it. And she says, sadly, while African himself, Mbiti strives so hard to take on an alien Utumawazo. See? It's very much the European influence in his thinking, that he loses sense of African metaphysical conceptions. The African concept of time is not merely profane or ordinary, but also sacred. Indeed, it is the European lineal conception of that is one-dimensional, and she explained why. This is one of Mbiti's most obvious errors. Past, present, and future are meaningful only as relationships in a linear sequence, necessarily on a unidimensional. So when you think in terms of past, present, or future, you think in terms of unidimensional, in terms of time, and that is very European. They do not represent three dimensions. In the African conception, sacred, cyclical time gives meaning to ordinary linear time. So you cannot even understand the European linear time if you do not understand the African cyclical time, because the African cyclical time is actually what gives meaning to a linear time. So the circle sphere adds dimension to the line as it envelops it, and at the bottom of this chapter she shows that the sphere is multidimensional and it is curved. Sacred time is not past because it is not part of linear construct. So what is sacred has no time. The sacred is immortal. You cannot pinpoint what is sacred in past, present, or future. It is there, always been, and always will. The ancestors live in the present, and the future lives in us. Sacred time is eternal, and therefore it has the ability to join what Eliade has called hierophany. Rituals that express sacred time, connecting it with ordinary experience and punctuating life, restate and affirm values, beliefs, and symbols, thereby placing daily existence in a meaningful sacred context. So Africans do not need abstract European concept of the future to give their members hope. The European idea of progress is not a universal statement of meaning. And then the next paragraph actually concludes it in a very beautiful way, because she now put in context what this author is trying to do. You know, what is he probably getting at? It has nothing to do with religion per se, but rather has to do with technology. That's why now she begin to explain how the European has created misery for himself or herself by trying to control time. You know, so and then technology success depends in part of the assimilation of linear concept. And then she goes somewhere back. He says that for the European, time, like the future, becomes a force that dominates human life. See in that paragraph. So, and then at the bottom of that paragraph, the cosmic is the enemy of the technological, or so it becomes in European experience. And then they talk in that same paragraph, page 61, they talk about dead time. You can read it to understand what she started talking about there. Dead time, symbol, clock, the clock to now count and measure their time.